Hi again. So this is lecture 25. In this lecture, this lecture is going to change in the future. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep this one brief for multiple reasons, and mostly because of what you see on the screen here. Under lecture 25, we're going to quickly look at the process safety management topic page on the OSHA website. Process safety management is 29 CFR 1910-119. And then we're going to look at the Hazwoper topic page for OSHA, which is 29 CFR 1910-120. So they're one after the other, and they have a lot of relatedness. And in the future times I teach this class, what I'm probably going to do is integrate the disaster preparedness and response to these two standards, because they tend to all be intertwined. And you'll see that. So what I really want you to do, if you can see on the screen here, I want you to watch this 3-part series on the Bhopal, India disaster. It is the reason why we have a process safety management standard, and likely what led to the adoption of Hazwoper. And then I've got almost a 9.5 minute YouTube video on why is Hazwoper training needed. That'll give you kind of everything you need there. And then because we're talking about, levee explosions probably could have gone under the either flammable liquids. Yeah, it probably could have gone under flammable liquids. Might as well put it here because it creates a disaster. So I want you to know what a levee is. So just try to figure out what that acronym stands for. Then I'm going to quickly show you the contents of these 3 PDFs. 2 are PSM, 1 is Hazwoper. It's actually from, I think, Oregon OSHA. I think they created this one. It's pretty good. That's why I added it. And then I've got an old PowerPoint that Richard Bezick, he always covered it. I'm not even going to attempt to. He's a really, really smart guy in this area. You can take a look at it if you want to, but you don't need to. So again, watch the Bhopal, India disaster. So it's about 25 minutes long, all 3 parts together. Watch it. It's so good. It'll give you everything you need and more when it comes to process safety management. So first, what is process safety management? Interestingly enough, it's when you have a processing plant. So if you have a certain quantity of chemical on site, and under 1910-119, it lists the chemicals that if you have them in certain quantities, you're covered by the standard. If you don't have the quantities of those chemicals, then you are not, and you don't have to worry about it. What it has you do is go through and figure out, as these chemicals, the way they're stored, where they're transferred at the plant. It's a chemical plant or a petrochemical plant. You are attempting to, you're doing a hazard analysis, basically, or a fault tree analysis. Very similar to everything we had covered in the first 2 weeks of this course, you do on this process to try to find out where the potential weak parts are, where something could fail and go wrong, cause an accidental release, or overpressurize and explode, or catch fire, all these different things, or 2 things combined that shouldn't combine. You find where all those potential things, you rank them and rate them, and then you go through and you build in controls and redundancies and measures to make sure it never happens. That's what process safety management. And actually what I like about process safety management is the only one that really talks about human factors, or the contribution of the operator or the human operator. So it's a sophisticated standard. I think I had mentioned in the module review that you basically almost need to be an engineer to practice process safety management. But it's interesting. And so you can just take a quick look at this. You can kind of see some things over here on the right. It's meant for people who have experience in chemical engineering, really. The next topic is hazardous waste operations and emergency response. So again, this should be with the disaster preparedness. This is when there is a disaster and how do you respond to it. So it's similar to the disaster response or disaster preparedness and response, that you have to kind of identify the hot zone of where the release is or lay it out. Then you have a neutral area where you do decontamination, or at least separate what is considered the safe area from the hot area. So it's like a neutral zone. And then you get the rest of the area. And along with Hazwoper, along with PSM, you might be discussing EPCRA, which is the environmental protection for neighborhoods that are nearby. I mentioned it in the disaster preparedness. And so this is very sophisticated as well. You have to go through 40 hours of training to even go on and work it on one of these sites. And so it's all about wearing Class A PPE, continually evaluating the hazards or the issues as you go in and start whether it's collecting, confining, or trying to just clean up. It's maybe a better clean up or contain what the release was. And so whether it was leaking to ground or to water or whatever it might be, what you're trying to do is contain it and control it so it doesn't spread or possibly affect other people or other areas. That's what it's really about. So it's a lot about personal protective equipment, decontamination, when you come out. In many ways, the 9/11 attack in New York City was a Hazwoper site. But unfortunately, they didn't treat it as such, which is why so many first responders ended up with diseases that killed them because they didn't follow proper Hazwoper protocol. What I'd like to show you now is some of the handouts here, the PDFs. This first one is the OSHA 3132, and as you can see here, you're assessing highly hazardous chemicals, which you have on site. Again, has to be over a minimum amount. So flow diagrams, process chemistry, maximum intended inventory, save upper and lower limits for temperature and pressures and flows. As you can see, it's very much a process control. Materials of construction, piping diagrams, electrical classification, relief system and design, ventilation system design, design code, standards, material energy balances, safety systems. These are things that I went to school for my chemical engineering. And a little bit, it gets into the what if checklist, HAZOP, failure mode and effect analysis, fault tree analysis. These are, again, it's the things we had talked about. They want you to use these to really, plot out could something go wrong, and then put in place either operators, detection, or control systems to prevent that from happening. And when you watch the Bhopal disaster, you'll see how systems failed. If they had a proper PSM, those things shouldn't have happened, and then you'll see what the aftermath is. So here is another PDF for PSM, and in that last one, it says you should read this one. And as you can see, it has the purpose, hazards of the chemical process, technology, equipment, employee involvement, the process analysis, operating procedures, employee training, contractors, startup, all this stuff that we just talked about. So it is very engineering based. And then we get to Hazwoper. This one's called Hazwoper for the Perplexed. I think that's kind of funny. And so it talks about, it's worker protection when they go into a hazardous waste site. Because sometimes you don't know what's there. And so you start out with Class A. You're wearing a moon suit. You're breathing through an SCBA, which is a self-contained breathing apparatus. And so you only have a certain amount of time. You go in there and you either utilize equipment or collect samples, or you're using a shovel or whatever it is. But you have to know how to wear that equipment properly and be able to still function, because you're very limited. You're on your little bubble. It talks about cleanup operations, treatment, storage, disposable facilities, emergency response, brownfields. It's an environmental protection agency concept. Drug labs, they're a hazardous waste site. You have to go in with Class A. You don't know what's there and in what quantity, or if conditions could change while they're there. So it just really, it's following what needs to be done. And again, you need a lot of training in order to do this type of stuff. So watch the videos, take a look at this stuff. I just want to give you an understanding that these things exist. And for future classes, I will be integrating in the disaster preparedness and everything into this, because they're all so interconnected, and also they tend to be all related to environmental concerns as well, whether it's preventing a release, responding to a spill or a release, and then it could relate to weather-related stuff or terrorism and all that kind of stuff. So that's all I got for this lecture. So email me if you have any questions, but you got pretty much everything you need here just for a general awareness level.